You're dean of the Vlerick Business School. Really amazing. Congratulations also to the huge kind of achievement and the great scoring in the Redstone University study, where you ranked actually 8th overall of over 450 universities and institutions in Europe in terms of efficiency in spinning out and founding startups. I didn't have that on my radar, but really great. So I was very much looking forward to learning more how you achieved that as an institution. And maybe you can start with a quick intro of yourself, some background, what led you to becoming a dean at Vlerick. I guess it's nothing where you as a child wake up and say, hey, I one day want to be a dean of a university.
No. Not at all. I don't think think I knew such a thing existed. No, indeed. So what brought me on that journey? So I studied engineering myself, but then, got so interested in the business side of things that I wanted to understand the business side of technology. So I went to business school, and actually I went to Vlerick. So I'm also an alumna of the school where I'm now the dean. And so by doing a master's at Vlerick, I got so passionate and interested. I did a master's in marketing, that I started a PhD, and then I moved abroad. I was in the US for a number of years, doing research, teaching MBA students and executive MBA students at Emory University in Atlanta. And then when my husband and myself decided to move back to Europe, it was really Vlerick that was pulling at my heartstrings, and I joined the school. And then 10 years later, became the dean, and that was 2015. So I've been leading the school now since then for 9 years now.
Wow. Also quite unusual that somebody with an engineering background runs a business school.
Could be, yeah.
But maybe
I never ran the statistics, but that would be an interesting one.
Just anecdotally, I think it's rather unusual. Do you think that has shaped your kind of educational philosophy or leadership style in any way?
Well, I think what you gain by studying engineering beyond sort of the technical knowledge is, it really shapes your sort of analytical thinking side, which I think, was always sort of a strength. You do engineering because you're good at mathematics, and but that got even sharpened, I think, and sort of that sort of analytical mindset, always wanting to understand how things function. I think that's become part of me.
Amazing. And maybe now let's move to Vlerick. Could you just maybe not everybody is familiar with it across Europe. Could you briefly describe the institution, where it is, the size, etc.?
Yeah. So Vlerick is a Belgian business school, postgraduate business school. So we don't have undergrad students. We start basically with specialized master's programs, MBA, executive MBA, and executive education. We have been around for quite a long time, since 1953. So more than 70 years, and we're founded by a guy named Andre Vlerick. So this is where we got our name. And we were founded in this era of, post World War II economic relaunch, very much with this idea in mind that, building a strong economy, for that we needed, entrepreneurship, and we needed qualified talent to lead companies. And so that has been the origin of the school, and that I think today is very much embedded in what we see as the purpose of the school. So, Michael, you just told me, Vlerick came on your radar by seeing how we did well in the study, and we were very happy to see that. On the other hand, for us, it wasn't so very surprising, because quite literally, our purpose is to develop entrepreneurial leaders. And so to see that is actually also happening, and that we're successful at that, in objective terms, is very nice, because what we believe is that entrepreneurship is really a value creating for society, and that anybody can benefit from an entrepreneurial mindset. So it's not necessarily that all of our students become entrepreneurs, but we do want them to have studying at the school to be a transformational experience that makes them believe in opportunities, and makes them believe that they can act and take initiative and be entrepreneurial in that sense.
Totally understand. Now there are a lot of kind of business schools, MBA schools across Europe, and a lot of them say, look, we want to also be entrepreneurial. What do you think sets your institution apart from others?
I think that there's a couple of things. One, I think, is we haven't been sort of late to the bandwagon. Entrepreneurship has always been, since 1953, in our DNA. And so already, 30 years ago, all of our MBA programs and all of our master's programs, for example, had an entrepreneurship course in them, which was not necessarily a given at that time. So
sorry, since 1953, you had this.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship courses.
One of the first programs in the school was a program, in fact, for entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurship as a course. We ran it, I think, since the 90s. Now, I wasn't there, so I cannot testify exactly when, but definitely this was sort of always part of the core of our programs, and a non-negotiable and non-discussable. And so entrepreneurship has always been there as an important value for the school. I think even, it's embedded in the school's mindset itself. We are an independent business school. We have 2 parent universities, but we operate independently from them. So that also means that, also within the school, the faculty and the staff, we are entrepreneurial, because, we are sort of together building that school. And so it's been always part of our activities. And so we brought all of our activities on entrepreneurship and for entrepreneurs together in what is called the Vlerick Entrepreneurship Academy. And that Vlerick Entrepreneurship Academy basically runs the whole range from inspiring our students to start companies, onto we have programs for scale-ups and do research on scale-ups, on SMEs, growth companies, family businesses, basically the whole range, and the whole life cycle of companies is part of that.
Impressive. And then how do you, like, in this kind of setup, and I've seen you have like a lot of different obviously sub areas and professors. How do you kind of run what I'm always run such a probably rather independent organization? So I see like two topics. It's like you have a lot of kind of kings with their own kingdoms. I've learned oftentimes very little authority over them on one hand. And how do you then run and strive for kind of performance, for quality control?
Yeah, so I guess your questions are a bit around how do you run an academic institution?
Absolutely.
Which is basically which is an organization full of experts, right? So faculty are really have in-depth expertise about what they do research on and what they teach. And so the biggest thing that they bring to the table, the biggest contribution they have, is through that expertise. Now, at the same time, as an organization to be well functioning, you also need to have a clear direction for the organization at large, and you cannot have, Vlerick has 50 faculty, full-time faculty, 250 staff. You cannot have everybody run into an opposite direction, and that creates a completely disjointed organization. So I think that's a bit the challenge that you're hinting at. Like, how do you herd the cats? And so that we're all sort of, working together and evolving the school in the same direction. Well, I think, firstly, we need to recognize that indeed faculty are experts, and that is their greatest contribution. And trying to control that, it's like, if you try to hold on to it, it's like sand going through your fingers. For that expertise to flourish, there needs to be a degree of academic freedom for people to follow their natural curiosity, motivation to understand, to develop the state of the art, knowledge, and to think of what are the current interesting questions that we need to ask ourselves, and how can we develop answers to them, and then how do we bring those answers into the classroom and develop our students. I think the best thing that you can do as an organization is first, just make sure that you hire great people that indeed are self-motivated, that are curious, but also people, and that is also something that I think distinguishes Vlerick, is people who can think beyond themselves, who are not individual career builders, but that are institution builders. Vlerick is run like a partnership. So where the faculty feel co-responsible, together responsible for the success of the organization and the school, and we're quite fortunate to have so many people that that really have a mindset of being an institution builder, and that think beyond themselves, and that thinking beyond themselves is about the school at large, but also very much thinking about our participants and our students. How can we make them thrive? Because our impact as a school happens through them. It's through what they realize, in practice, in their careers, in life, with their businesses, that we have an impact, and that orientation towards the customer and participant and the student is very strongly present within the school, and you see it in very small signals of what the culture of the place is.
That's actually a very interesting approach. I haven't heard so often, or actually I think not so far. Would you say that is also one of the secrets why you're really good at research, at teaching, and at entrepreneurship? Basically striving for the higher good. And then maybe a follow-on question. I mean, it's a very, in a way, kind of social approach even to that, and taking the whole community in mind. Would you say that you as a woman have shaped that even more? I mean, just from the first minutes talking to you, I can see a difference in maybe how you think about things, and I'm wondering how much is that you? How much have you shaped that, and how much has it maybe been in the DNA of the school?
Well, maybe that's also typically female, but I'm not going to take the credit. What I think I have done or put in motion is I've always very strongly felt, even having been a student at the school myself, so I have felt the impact. I often say I entered the school as a shy engineer, and I left the school as a person feeling like, the sky is the limit and everything is possible, and let me just try and we will see where we end up. And so I learned a lot, I gained a lot of knowledge, but at the same time, I was shaped as a person. And still today, that is something that I ask myself, what do we impart on our students in terms of knowledge? Yes, great, has to be done, fantastic, obviously, and it needs to be state-of-the-art knowledge, and it is. But is that enough? And I think that we for ourselves raise the bar a bit more and say also, well, how do we shape people? And what else is there that they have gained? I mean, I literally, last week we had graduation. I literally asked in my speech to the students, I asked that to them, think about the person that you were on the first day, and think about the person that you are today, and what has changed. And I hope that we gave them a bit more than just knowledge. And as to my contribution to that, I always felt that was there at Vlerick, but it was sort of implicit. And what I try to do is, let's be explicit about it. Let's put it into words. Let's indeed be vocal about it. And all of our students talk about live, learn, leap. That's the words that we gave to it. Live your dream, learn continuously, leap with confidence. And that is how we express, sort of what we want to impart on them.
I really like the saying, like, take what's implicitly there and be explicit about that. It's probably something that could be true for a lot of organizations, not only university type organizations, but in general, companies, even foundations, and so on.
Probably, yes. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Maybe now switch a little bit to research, because something we've also done is only chosen universities that also had kind of a focus in research. Can you be a little bit maybe more explicit even? So what do you do to really foster a thriving research environment? And how does that compare maybe to teaching and entrepreneurship? And then as a follow-up, maybe you can highlight one or two things where you had a focus or where you had some great achievements, I mean, as university.
Yeah. No, I think a good question, because I think also sometimes it is felt like, universities or business schools activities towards entrepreneurship are sort of separate from the academic side of the school or of the university. I think we have a strong entrepreneurship group on the academic side as well. That do great research. And again, there's it's not great mysteries. Just hire good people that are really very driven. And motivated to do good research, to work together with others to make that happen. And then as an institution, what you can give them is you can give them space, you can give them resources, and you can give them recognition. And I think those are the mechanisms through which you foster. And you value research that is happening at the school. We also have a fantastic research dean's office that is responsible for organizing many activities around fostering an active academic and research climate, bringing together our PhD students, our faculty, our researchers, our DBA students. They organize our writing weeks where everybody sits together intensely to focus on, crunching out the papers, but also thinking about what are current interesting topics. Our latest research day was about the impact of AI on research activities, and what that will change. We're also talking about developments like open science. So there's I think an active debate also around the practice of research. And a sharing climate. Last week, one of our entrepreneurship faculty shared, what we call the story of the paper. Where we share, okay, where does this start? Where, the idea, the setbacks in the research, and where did it end up? And that is something super interesting for our younger PhD students as well to learn about. I think one of the interesting developments in the field of entrepreneurship in the school in the last 2 years has been the creation of the European Scale-Up Institute. So this is basically a consortium, an alliance of European business schools that get together to jointly develop stronger research specifically on scale-ups. To understand what is the scale-up environment in Europe, And also, not only just look at what the lay of the land is, but also understand what the dynamics are, what explains performance, and what are the themes that are interesting for scale up. So Vlerick was one of the initiating schools of the European Scale Up Institute, together with schools like Rotterdam, ESSEC, ESADE, a bunch of other ones are all part of it. And the reason I highlight this as an interesting development is for a number of reasons. One, because it shows that we need to think in terms of ecosystems and collaborations. I do think we can get much further if we join forces and not all on our own little islands try to answer the same questions. So it really shows that collaboration amongst schools. Secondly, I think scale-ups obviously are the high growth companies of today that are the big companies of tomorrow. And if we within Europe want to have a thriving economy and a thriving entrepreneurial environment, then I think looking specifically at what's happening in scale-ups is super interesting, and there's a lot of contributions to be made there.
Oh, absolutely. We can't have enough scale-ups. And the ones that are there, they ideally would get a lot bigger than they are now. So certainly a very, very important topic. Maybe now going to teaching, another important area of every university. Can you maybe share, is there any kind of teaching innovation, anything that you're doing that you're particularly proud of? Maybe let's start with that.
Yeah, I think that there's quite a bit that we are proud of. First of all, I would say that what are the three key ingredients of a Vlerick learning experience? One I already mentioned, it's state-of-the-art knowledge that you gain. A second ingredient is what we call a bias for action. What we want to create is what I call, lean forward learning experiences, not lean backward learning experience where you just, sit and let it come to you. So we have a very strong bias for action. And that's also what we require from our students. And a third ingredient is creativity and innovation. So we're always interested in thinking about how can we do this in a more creative way, in an innovative way, that indeed stimulates learning and that creates a bigger learning impact. So we've created our own games and simulations. IMAX is one, which is a standout of our MBA programs. We have a simulation that brings the essentials of finance to our students, that also is an evergreen in our programs. So we create games, we create simulations, we create very active learning experiences like that. Also cases. One of our faculty won the Case Center Award in entrepreneurship this year with a case about an alumnus, a scale-up company founded by an alumnus of the school. Very interesting case that was about, do you search for external capital or do you say no to that? It's about a company called Ovinto, active in railroad, rail traffic software. And so writing these cases and developing these cases, I think, is a very effective way to bring the learning to our students. Very
interesting, also very diverse. Maybe one follow-up question to that. Now, obviously, we're going through a huge transformation in terms of technology, society. Couldn't one ask why do you need kind of a university at all in this circumstance? Couldn't what you described not also be done maybe in the future purely by AI?
Yeah, very, very good question. So last week at graduation, on that same day of graduation, we always have a full day faculty meeting. And this year it was fully devoted to AI. Indeed, asking ourselves those same questions. How do we look at that? And our stance is, I think, twofold. First, our stance is to fully embrace, what the capabilities are of AI. And we're only, I think, at the beginning of it, to embed that in the learning experiences that we create. And secondly, that we have a very strong task as, as business schools or any educational organization to make sure that our students become proficient AI users and at the same time proficient AI critics that understand how it works, what it is capable of doing, but also what can be potential pitfalls, and that can really ask, the right questions. Now, Michael, your question is, could you not do an MBA in AI? Could I not go today to ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever is your preferred app and just, ask, tell me what the basics of finance are and give me some examples and give me some applications. And I'm sure within minutes, you'll get answers, and you'll gain a lot from that. And you probably will gain a lot that, you could also in the past get from watching YouTubes or reading books or, the channel changes, but the content stays the same. And so, also 50 years ago, we could ask ourselves, why do you need to do an MBA? You could just go to the library and read all of those books and you may have gained the same understanding. So my answer to that is the following. What I see happening in a business school learning experience, and what I definitely see happening at Vlerick, is that, again, this has to do with the entrepreneurial mindset in learning, is the whole trick is being able to apply what you have learned and to be able to bring that into practice. And we as an organization, as an institution, have succeeded not when our students have gained knowledge, but when they have succeeded in putting that knowledge into practice. That is when we have done our jobs. And we formally measure that. So we measure what we call the learning impact indicator. And that is our key metric to look at, do we succeed in that mission, that people can actually practice what they have learned and actually do something with it. And I think that this is still what people struggle with the most, what they need help with the most, and where it is very social learning experience that we provide is very helpful. So it really is about being able to bridge from theory and from knowledge to practice.
I really like that. I also like the anecdote about the books, because the same discussion we're having now about AI and educational institutions we essentially also had with the internet, with YouTube, etc. Exactly. But actually it goes even beyond the books. And I totally agree that this experience, if you're with people in a room, is very unique. And a lot of people now find this hard to replicate with a purely digital manner. And that's actually also the discussion of actually bringing office time back, maybe not 100%, but just people feel the limitations of a 100% digital.
And don't get me wrong, I think you can also develop very active and very social learning experiences also online. We see that happening in our online MBA. The students are, collaborating or feel very, very connected. But you do need to put that in the design of the learning experience. It doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You also mentioned or put a big emphasis in learning into how to put knowledge into practice, into how to apply it. So maybe can you share where has it been applied? Share some success stories of startups that originated from your school.
Let me mention just a few. Last week, it was here in the news in Belgium that a company called Team Blue had been valued at more than 5 billion euro, and it was founded and started by a guy called Jonas Danes, who's a Vlerick alumnus. He followed our SME program. And so that was at a time when the company was really tiny, and he was also very young, in his 20s. He was also the first winner of the Vlerick Venture Award. So every year we give an award to a young company started by a Vlerick alumnus, and that's called the Vlerick Venture Award. And he's been the first winner of that. And so to now see that he has been able to build this company, from basically from a handful of people to a company valued more than 5 billion. I look at that with great admiration. It's a fantastic journey to see. So that's a great one. I had in my class when I was, in my pre-dean days, when I was still teaching a marketing course for the executive MBA, I had in my class a guy called Tim van Houwermere, who then later on founded a company called Argenix. It's a biotech company. And I checked this morning, it now has a market cap of 25 billion. And a fantastic journey in I think 15 years. Also having started it from scratch and a really great story of a biotech company that is going from the lab to the market. So not, stays a research institution, but is now really bringing their first products to market. Really fantastic to see that. So those are, I think, some great stories. But I also do believe that, we shouldn't just only look at, what the market cap is of a company to measure success. Honestly, I think any entrepreneur who takes the risks and starts a company deserves our admiration and our respect, even when that entrepreneur failed. One of our first winners of the Student Entrepreneurship Fund, we have a Student Entrepreneurship Fund that gives grants to starting students and young alumni who start a company. One of our first winners had a fantastic product, great idea. They worked on it, the team, for 2 years, and eventually saw, okay, we thought this was a great idea. We've gained a lot of market feedback. Is it just not viable? And so, okay, we learned that, and we need to move on to the next thing. And I look at that and say, okay, applause, applause for you that you tried it, applause that you gave it your all. And we know that the success rate of starting companies is not 100%. But I do think we still need to applaud them for 100%.
Well, that's so true. I think that's very important also to kind of not put this stigma on people if they have tried and it hasn't worked out, not to discourage others or the people that have tried once. And oftentimes, actually, successful founders, it's not their first gig where it becomes very big, but it's like the second, the third, the fourth. It's quite interesting. Yeah. So maybe, you've taught yourself and you've named a few really amazing examples. I think even some of the really highlights in Europe, also in very diverse areas. Do you see any common traits in the students that later become successful founders?
I find that an interesting question. Like, can you recognize an entrepreneur? We ask the same thing about leaders. Like, can you recognize, a natural born leader? Just like we ask, can you recognize a natural born entrepreneur? And then when I think about, these many alumni that have gone on to become entrepreneurs, and I look for what are their common personality traits, I do see that they have vastly different personalities, going from more introverted to very extroverted. So I don't think an entrepreneur necessarily is, somebody who's jumps on tables and is the most, vocal and extrovert. What I do see, however, across the board in them is a kind of, optimism, but an optimism that at the same time is rooted in reality, where and actually this Metalika from Too Good to Go told me this, and she said, you need to have patience in patience. And I thought that was such a great way to express it. And that is what I recognize in many successful entrepreneurs, that they have this patient impatience. Impatience in the sense of they want to get things done, they want to gain speed, they want to see action, and they're always sort of pushing, but at the same time, you need to be patient about it, because it's going to be with ups and downs and good days and bad days and roadblocks and setbacks and 100 no's before you get a yes. And to have that stamina, that resilience, and indeed that patience to look through all of that and say, this is where we're heading and we're just going to keep going. That is something that I think I recognize. It's optimism rooted in a very down-to-earth mindset of patient impatience.
That's I think very, very, very good. I've patience and patience with respect to entrepreneurs is probably very true. What you mentioned is optimism. What I find very, very interesting. I think 2 days ago I saw a little interview with Anand Ambani, the son of Mukesh Ambani, which now has this amazing wedding. And he was asked, what did you learn from your father? And what was the most important thing that he taught you? And he answered optimism, which I found super interesting. He said, no matter what happens, no matter how hard something is or if it works out or not, but never lose your optimism and always look with optimism at the world. So that's probably also something that in this case, I think the most successful Asian entrepreneur embraces a lot. And you also mentioned that. So, and I can just by anecdotally, if I look at a lot of my friends or other entrepreneurs, it's true. They are oftentimes by heart extremely optimistic about the world and the future.
Right, because if you don't believe that you can succeed, of course you will never get started. So you do need to have that optimistic, which is not naive, but you do need to have that optimistic belief about it. And beyond that, I do think it's a moral duty as well.
Oh, it absolutely. Otherwise, the world would be in a much worse state.
I think optimism is the origin of change and action. Because if you don't believe that something can actually be changed and changed for the better, you will always just stay on the sidelines.
For sure. Maybe you mentioned quite a bit about like the philosophy, but can you mention or share a little bit very concretely if there's a student at running in one of your courses, what are any concrete support structures that Vlerick offers them if they want to start their own company?
So all of our students get the opportunity in the entrepreneurship course to develop a business plan, and basically all of them then think about, if I were to start a company, what could it be? If they want to be serious about it, we do offer them a coaching program, where we guide them, where we also have external coaches, experienced entrepreneurs that we match them up with, so that that they can learn from more experienced entrepreneurs who are, for example, active in that same industry that they're thinking about, or have developed something similar. So we have quite an extensive coaching and mentoring activity.
If you maybe I can just kind of interrupt you here and ask, if you say we are teaching them, you said like external, then how many is it, a group of internal people or professors, and then how much of that is external? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so we are 50 core faculty in the school, so internal, and all of the MBA and master's courses are by and large taught by the core faculty. Where we use external people is for, bringing in the testimonials, the guest speaker sessions, the stories from the field and from practice. And we often do work together with alumni for that. So for example, we had this year at the opening of the academic year, we had one of the co-founders of a company called Edgar & Cooper, and they developed a new brand in the pet food market that, by the way, this year then it was acquired by General Mills. And so it was the first time we actually had a dog on stage at the opening of the academic year. Wow. Now Jürgen started this company while he was doing his MBA. And so that, obviously was quite intense. But since then, in the past decade or so that he's been working on Edgar & Cooper, he's always been a regular guest speaker. And so a couple of times a year, he joins one of our faculty members, to teach a session or to share the story. And he's frequently been a part of our learning programs. I'm thinking of another alumni who even co-developed a session with one of our faculty members, specifically on culture and how do you scale up culture. So he developed a software company from scratch, to 600 people. And the key thing that he was very interested in is how do we make sure that we build a strong culture, but also are able to scale that culture, as the company grows. And so together with one of our faculty members, they developed a teaching session with a toolbox and a framework on how you scale culture. And they typically co-teach that session when it appears in one of our programs. So I think these are like concrete examples of how we bring in alumni and entrepreneurs into our programs. Next to what I just mentioned, sort of the one-on-one mentoring that we match our starting entrepreneurs with. And then I think that the last thing that I would mention is that student entrepreneurship fund, where students have the opportunity to pitch and apply for a grant to bridge, to bridge from dreaming to doing, and to get some seed money to get their startup going.
Oh, so Vlerick has its own fund.
Yeah. So it's we have the Vlerick Student Entrepreneurship Fund, which is funded and helped by some Vlerick friends who want to give back to the next generation of Vlerick entrepreneurs, and with that we can give grants to starting entrepreneurs.
That's very interesting. How big is it, or how big would be a grant? How long would it run?
A grant would be up to 50K. And it's basically meant to help students that are, let's say, in need for some cash to develop a first prototype, or develop their first website, or go to a particular fair or trade show that they would need to be at, and so they can apply, and obviously there is a selection that is happening, but they have the opportunity to apply to get a grant if we believe in the idea and if we believe in the team.
And if you say grant, it's really a donation, or it has to be paid back, or has to be kind of given equity back, or what's the philosophy behind it?
There's no equity against it. There is sort of the handshake agreement that we say, whenever you are further in your life and in your career with this venture or the next, you take sort of the moral obligation to then as well give back to the next generation.
I
That's
love
the
that.
spirit behind it.
I totally love that. I think that oftentimes universities are, and now here it's a little bit different structure, but universities kind of are so much concerned with what happens if a startup kind of gets successful, so that we get a huge kind of reward for what we have taught them, or actually for some IP. But because the probability of startups is so low, so I think it would be a lot better if they focused on the probability of success instead of saying, hey, if something is successful, then how do I maximize the probability of return? Because if you also look at, for example, a lot of the kind of large US universities, the donations they often are getting are even much bigger of the like super successful founders, because they're so grateful. They're so much bigger than what they kind of take in as kind of royalties and fees. And by kind of doing that at the very beginning, doing something good for students and implanting this moral obligation, it might be long-term the much better and more rewarding strategy. And there are a lot of stories of where people are very kind of grateful for what has been done to them in an early stage of their career, and then give back 100 times more in the future. Now, you've kind of described this, what you're doing to foster entrepreneurship, and I also can totally see why Vlerick is really actually embracing entrepreneurship and living this third pillar. Oftentimes, entrepreneurship is kind of called the third pillar of education next to research and teaching. But one of the huge critique points for especially business schools is that most problems in today's world are actually physical and complex technical problems, and kind of these, or a lot of universities and business schools are mainly producing kind of brands or software companies. How would you answer to that? And what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, two things basically. One is, and again, I'm afraid this is only anecdotal evidence, but when I think of sort of, our alumni that have become founders and started companies, I'm thinking indeed of this pet food founder, this biotech founder, we have somebody who's building a great company in earplugs. So those are all like physical, non-software type of ventures. So I'm not necessarily sure it is true that we, for the majority, create, AI companies or software companies. Today, I definitely see this variety. I see this diversity of ideas and businesses being started. That being said, my background is in chemical engineering. And then when you think of innovations in that field, typically those are innovations that require huge capital investments, right? You need to build a pilot production site or whatever. You need certain infrastructure to make it happen. And obviously this, idea of huge capital investment and, startup entrepreneur that is going to friends, fools, and family, that usually doesn't go very well together. And so then I think in certain fields that require that, major capital investments, you will rather see that the existing major companies and multinationals are innovating there, or are taking participations in starting company, or are looking at what is the IP that is being developed in universities and in science faculties, and that they are already there from the get-go, sponsoring those PhDs, sponsoring the infrastructure that is needed for the innovations in that field. Whereas, you could say, with a couple of data scientists and computer scientists and somebody who's a bit commercial and with literally no capital at all needed, you can start a business. And so I think that automatically, I think that students who are driven to become entrepreneurs, automatically they will go into these areas that are more light on the capital side.
Yeah. Also, what I've seen is that sometimes, or maybe even numerous times, entrepreneurs, they start in a way what you described light, but then once they have their first or second success, they tackle harder and harder and more complex problems.
Right.
Probably because they feel more confident, but also because they're able to raise a lot more capital.
Exactly.
Kind of assemble really amazing teams and great engineering talent also is kind of
that's true.
trusting them.
That's typically, your second or third or fourth time.
You could even argue that because Elon Musk is always taken as an example to build these hardcore kind of physical companies. But actually, his first two companies were software companies.
Exactly.
And then obviously third one and fourth was Tesla and SpaceX. So he took kind of a similar path. But kind of to kind of also maybe foster. Do you have any collaboration with different industries or other universities to foster this type of startup creation?
I'm not sure, Michael, I got your question.
So do you collaborate with larger corporations in terms of, I don't know, generating ideas or with technical universities? And can you describe anything what you do on the kind of cooperation side and collaboration side?
Yeah, I mean that's a valid comment following up on the previous question. And indeed, how can we team up students, with those, where the science, because we're a business school, we're not a technical school. We do have two parent universities, as I said, with whom we collaborate, and that both have great engineering departments. So you would hope that, some things come out of that. Probably we could go further in building those connections even more than today. What we've also seen is we have a specialized master in innovation and entrepreneurship. And there we've redesigned the curriculum, because what we observed was that program is really good for starting entrepreneurs, but there's also definitely a need for intrapreneurs, for people to go into these already existing large companies and to be innovative and run the innovation programs that they have there. And so intrapreneurs are also needed, in that we also have a role to play in training them, in preparing them, and then embedding the skills and the knowledge and of what it requires to be an entrepreneur, and run corporate venturing programs or run corporate innovation programs, which have just as much entrepreneurship and innovation in them than if you're a founder of a startup.
Absolutely. I think, especially short and midterm, that's the largest leverage we're having to kind of transform also these really large organizations, and the immediate impact obviously is gigantic. Maybe also following up on that, where do you see the biggest bottlenecks in kind of transferring academic research and resources into the business world and into the startup creation from your observation?
So I would mention maybe two. One is where we're looking at how can we make sure that indeed this transfer happens of what the academic knowledge creation is that is happening in business schools and universities, and how this actually gets disseminated and gains real world impact. And there's a lot of intermediary steps that need to happen, because we almost speak different languages. If you look at what is published in the top academic journals, this is not something that a practitioner would necessarily read. And so that requires from us, and should be part of our mission, and it is part of our mission, to say, okay, let's take this and let's make sure that we reach that real world impact by taking all of these intermediary tech steps to disseminate, to translate, and to make sure that those academic insights turn into real world insights that can be, activated. So that's one. And a second one that I would highlight is more at the level of this entrepreneurial mindset and this mission that we have to create entrepreneurial leaders. And there we also need to be realistic when we look at our master's and MBA students. Some really want to become an entrepreneur. Some are very open-minded. They're finding their way in the world. And then, there's definitely a very traditional career path, going into, the finance world, or going into a traineeship and going up the corporate ladder. And what I sometimes see is that students had an intrinsic entrepreneurial ambition, which they shelve for a little bit, and then say, okay, within a few years, I will definitely start a business. But then that few years becomes a decade, and that decade becomes 20 years. And in the meantime, they're a bit in a golden cage, where it becomes very, very difficult to step out of that, and let go of all of the privileges and all of the, certainty that you have at that point in time, and then to become a startup entrepreneur again. So that, I think, is another sort of bottleneck in making sure that we as business schools and universities are part of that entrepreneurial societal value creation.
Amazing. I think that was even very good, close to closing statement. We're coming to the end. Just maybe one last question. You've had an amazing career. You're on the forefront of a lot of developments of today's world. So what advice would you give your own 18-year-old self today?
Yeah, there's a lot that I would say to my 18-year-old self, but probably the most important one would be to reach much higher than I think is possible.
That's very nice. Marion, it was so great talking to you. I feel I would love to go back to university immediately myself, and
always welcome at Vlerick.
Keep founding a startup. Thank you very much. I think it's going to be hard, but it's really you think oh wow, that would be so amazing. So thanks a lot for this great conversation. Lots of very, very interesting and inspiring points. So thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Michael.